Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a fascinating journey today, one that, honestly, completely shifted how I look at everyday fears, workplace anxieties, and just the general friction of daily life. Look, if you've ever felt totally overwhelmed by office politics or just blindsided by a bad day, stick around. We're going to explore exactly how to turn that stress into actionable courage. Let's dive right into this profoundly radical premise from the brilliant physicist Marie Curie. She didn't say the world is inherently safe, and she definitely didn't say our fears are irrational. She said something way more demanding. She said fear isn't a permanent state of being. Actually, fear is simply the empty space where understanding hasn't arrived yet. The remedy for fear isn't comfort, it's clarity. When we refuse to look at difficult realities, anxiety thrives. But when we actively seek to understand them, that is when we gain freedom. Now this brings us to a really intriguing mystery. How do three completely different types of thinkers, I'm talking about a modern strategist mapping the laws of power, a legendary management guru figuring out the corporate workplace, and ancient Roman emperors practicing stoicism, how do they all arrive at the exact same conclusion about human nature? They aren't writing about fear directly, yet every single one of them is answering Curie's call. They're telling us to understand more so we can fear less.
Section 1. Playing the Social Game. Robert Greene on Power and Human Nature.
So, author Robert Greene maps the hidden architecture of power, and he starts us off with a pretty uncomfortable truth. Power is a timeless, inescapable social game. You can't just opt out because you don't like it. But look at how people typically play this game wrong. On one side, we have the deniers. These are the folks who outright refuse to acknowledge the game exists. They either retreat entirely, or worse, they get super passive-aggressive, manipulating others while insisting they have the moral high ground. On the other side, we have the extreme opposite, the Machiavellians. These are the reckless players who actually love the game a little too much. They're totally driven by ego, they lack empathy, and eventually they overreach and crash. And neither of these approaches works in the long run.
So the crucial point here is Greene's ideal archetype, the radical realist. This is the person who gets it right. They don't deny that social games exist, but they also don't let those games enslave their morals. They accept that power dynamics and, yes, even manipulation are just a feature of human nature. Listen, you don't have to love that fact, and you certainly don't have to be a toxic player yourself. But by understanding that the game exists, like simply knowing who the office gossip is, you avoid being blindsided. You gain this incredible calmness through knowledge.
Section 2. Managing Knowledge Workers. Peter Drucker on the Modern Workplace.
Transitioning over to the corporate world, management guru Peter Drucker arrives at a startlingly similar conclusion. The modern economy runs on knowledge workers, people whose primary capital is right there in their heads. And here's the catch. You cannot command a knowledge worker the way you manage machinery. They must be attracted. To be a truly great manager, you need epistemic humility. You've got to put your own ego aside and ask these specific questions. What does the other party want? What do they value? If you absolutely refuse to understand the inner world of your team, you're going to live in constant fear of them disengaging or quitting. But if you study these things, if you really understand them, you provide meaningful challenges, and motivation just naturally follows.
Section 3. Surviving the Small Crises. Stoicism and the Statistical Certainty of Difficulty.
Jumping all the way back to ancient Rome, author Ryan Holiday translates Stoic philosophy into practical tools for today. Now, the Stoics were completely obsessed with looking at the world exactly as it is, without sugarcoating it. And Holiday makes a brilliant distinction here. Marcus Aurelius and the ancients dealt with massive, catastrophic crises. We're talking wars, plagues, the literal fall of empires. But what we face mostly today are small crises. A flat tire on the way to work, a hidden fee on a hotel bill, a business deal that falls apart at the last possible minute. The Stoic realization is that these moments of friction aren't personal insults from the universe. They are a statistical certainty. If you live long enough, well, a flat tire is bound to happen. And this brings us to a core misunderstanding we really need to clear up. Acceptance is not passivity. It does not mean giving up. It is the active refusal to burn your precious energy raging against things that literally cannot be changed. This perfectly maps to Greene's radical realist. You don't have to be happy that your tire popped or that a manipulator exists in your office. You just have to accept that they do so you can direct your energy toward actually fixing the problem. Section 4. The Map of Radical Realism. Synthesizing the Thinkers. Okay, here is where it all connects. We've looked at the physicist, the power strategist, the management guru, and the Roman emperors. Now let's look at the grand synthesis. We have Curie telling us understanding reduces fear, we have Green mapping the social game, Drucker explaining knowledge work, and the Stoics accepting small crises. Independently, without talking to each other, they all converge on one essential stance right there in the center: radical realism. Look clearly, accept honestly, and act accordingly. Unpacking the vertical axis here is incredibly revealing. On the left side, we have a stark warning. If you deny reality, if you deny the social game, or deny that crises happen at all, you are basically guaranteeing that difficulty will arrive as a surprise. And what do surprises bring? Panic. But what happens if you accept reality? Well, that's the right side. You uncover meaningful challenges. Once you finally stop fighting reality, you can actually build a productive, sustainable daily practice inside of it. You know, we can even trace this back to the 10 Commandments. Think about this not just as moral instruction, but as an ancient foundational acknowledgement of the social game. Prohibitions against murder, theft, and false witness are essentially rules against the most destabilizing power moves humans can possibly make. Naming these destructive behaviors is the very first step in defending a civilization against them. It's literally radical realism from thousands of years ago.
Now, among all our source material today, there is one slight outlier we should address. Author Simon Sinek proposes this idea. The goal is to do no work. It's a super provocative framing, and on the surface, it sounds amazing, right? It sounds like a dream of transcending the game entirely, arriving at this frictionless life of pure passion with absolutely zero obligation.
But we have to look at Sinek's quote with a bit of gentle skepticism based on everything else we've learned today. Is a completely frictionless life actually possible? Well, Green and the Stoics would say absolutely not. Life doesn't stop being life just because you found your passion. Small crises are still statistically certain to happen. The ultimate goal isn't to escape friction entirely, because honestly, that's just a form of denial. The goal is to become so clear-eyed and practiced that friction simply no longer causes you to panic.
Section 5. Adjusting your sail. The realist's reward.
So how do we actually use this map to operate in a difficult world without totally burning out? What's the reward for doing all this hard work of looking at reality head-on? It comes down to this brilliant idea from William Arthur Ward. He said the pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change, the realist adjusts the sail. This cleanly separates the unready pessimist and the naive optimist from our hero, the radical realist. The pessimist understands the wind is bad, but doesn't realize they have the power to respond. The optimist doesn't really understand reality at all. Only the realist sees the wind, accepts it, and is completely prepared to act.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer today with a question I really want to leave you to ponder. The wind of the social game, of workplace challenges, and of those annoying daily crises, it will always blow. You cannot turn it off. So how will you adjust your sail today? Stop fighting reality. Start studying it. Because understanding is not a destination, it is a preparation. Now is the time to understand more so that you may fear less. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next explainer.